Reason why people want boutique is community number one. That's really what they're after. Fun is number two, and then results is number three. And again, not to say I had a crystal ball, but when I kind of heard the rhetoric in the media during COVID that, oh, in person is dead and at home and digital is where it's at, I wanted to throw up because it's not like Jane Fonda didn't have a digital workout 30 years ago. So it's been around forever. It's like the at-home kitchen, replacing the restaurant. It never will. People want that experience, and that's part of people are spending their dollars on experiential businesses, and that's what we are. We're kind of that fun entertainment value in addition to getting a great workout.
Welcome to the Art of Franchise Marketing. Each episode takes a deep dive into the franchise space and explores how the biggest and best brands handle national branding, franchise development, employee recruitment, and localized marketing on a daily basis. This podcast is brought to you by Medsertive, a localized digital marketing partner for franchise networks. Medsertive's Madeleine talked shop with franchise executives to discuss what's working, what's not, and answers the question, what else can you be doing to excel at the art of franchise marketing?
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Art of Franchise Marketing. We've got Lance Freeman today of Xponential Brands. Lance, thanks for coming on.
Oh, my pleasure. Great to see you.
You too. So we were just recently on one of our wellness franchise summits, and I'm excited to have you on the podcast because I think you've done in your career and in franchising what everyone is striving to do. So I want to get into it a little bit to discuss the real behind that. So, but before we start, tell everyone who you are, how you got started, and where Xponential Brands is now, in case for some reason they don't know. They will, but in case they don't.
Okay. Well, I kid about it. We've talked about it. Most people will say that they've kind of fell into franchising, and that's definitely me. I fell into it right after college in '94. So I'm tiptoeing on 30 years here. But I started working for an original entrepreneur of a franchise concept, and then they started franchising the model. So I became one of the early franchisees. I had no money, of course, but God bless mom and dad for investing in me, and it worked out. So I opened one of the first studios in that concept in Southern California, like many years ago. Mm-hmm. Did really well with it because I wanted to make sure I paid mom and dad back. And then once I paid them off, and then I started to scale. And so grew my own kind of studio portfolio from 1 to 6 pretty quickly over the course of a couple of years. And then I bought what's called the master franchise license. And I had basically a very large DMA to develop about 50 stores in. And so I did just that, and probably had that master for about 10 years. And it was actually the most lucrative master in that system. And so, as happens a lot in franchising, when franchisors have new money coming in, they want to buy those masters back, and so they came after mine pretty aggressively. I think I joked with you, I wasn't really interested in selling because I was doing really well, and I think as I was young and naive, I kind of thought that hey, I would have this thing forever, probably hand it down to the kids, and never had any designs on selling it really. I learned later that's actually a great strategy, as I've done that multiple times now. But so I did eventually have a nice check cut there, and kind of was in a place where I thought, hey, I'll figure out what I'm going to do kind of next here. And I was invited by the franchise store. They had bought another emerging brand to come in and develop that. So kind of got introduced to, and I hadn't really worked for anybody. I'd been really entrepreneurial for most of my life, but I thought, this would be kind of a good experience while I figure out what the next thing was for me would be. And that was a great learning experience. They had that concept. They had brought in a previous CEO from Yum Brands. So I always kind of kid, I learned a lot. I cut my teeth in franchising as on the master franchisor side, being a franchisee, but I learned more probably in a couple of years from that leadership that I had in the last 10, just because I learned franchising, at that point, and that was a great experience for me. I got introduced to kind of the networks and consultants, developed a lot of relationships there. And with that particular concept, developed it from, it was actually 3 units at the time to a few hundred pretty quickly. And we were kind of on the top of the world in all the networks. And then decided to, again, when you're kind of at that point, there's only one place to go. And as is, we're kind of in the inventory, business, I
Mhm.
always say. So, kind of, starting to look for what was next. And so, became a partner in a development group that started to develop emerging concepts. That was, I think what really sparked me the most was kind of building, brands. And so, uh, really one of the very first concepts I got to start developing was this little no-name brand called Club Pilates. And so I met up with our CEO and my partner, Anthony Geisler. I'll never forget it, but sat down with him, and he was actually hadn't bought the concept yet. And we were talking about it at its early stages. I mean, today it's a phenomenal brand, but this is just in 2015. So not even 10 years ago. And so we developed that to about 500 licenses. I mean, very quickly, like within 18
Mhm.
months. And then we decided, that what we Anthony really on the operator side was I really firmly believe he's just kind of the best operator in the space. Uh,
Mhm.
we were doing a great job with what we were doing, and it made sense to really partner up. And so he ended up acquiring my company, and then we took on some PE money to start buying brands and start growing what would kind of birth the idea of Xponential.
Mhm.
There were a number of reasons that kind of came out of that. We kind of realized that, first of all, not to say Pilates it's not a great brand or a great concept. We realized it was really the sales and marketing engine and the platform that we developed that was really winning in the market. So we
Right.
felt that was very scalable and that we could basically overlay that across other modalities, in
Mhm.
boutique fitness and do the same thing. And so that's what we set out to do. Also knowing that about 53% of the market was attending, you know, three or more concepts a month in this space. And so we said, well, let's, instead of having them go to other concepts, why don't we keep them all in our own ecosystem, and all tides rise and we win, right? And so that was the idea, and it worked. So, we're sitting at 10 brands today. We went public in July of 2021, and we were the number one performing IPO of 21. Stock was up 150%. And then, so today we sit at about 6,000 licenses globally. We're in 20 countries. We've got 3,000 stores operating in the market today. Brand
Mhm.
number 11 is in escrow. And so it continues to grow, and we keep, exceeding our marks with our earnings calls. So it's been a great ride. I'm very blessed because I think I've told you too, I'm a kinesiology and business major. So kind of living
Mhm.
my dream of being a part of this wellness company, and really making a positive impact on a lot of people's lives is, what we kind of set out to do here. So that's a little on me.
I love well, you weren't really in rags, but it's kind of rags to riches. Like same with our franchises we own. Like my husband's mother and father like backed it, and then we had to like pay them back, and now we've been able to grow. But there's a lot of pride in that, especially the more success you find is, especially in franchising. I think a lot of people think, oh, it's while the great part is you have the process set up to succeed, it doesn't matter if you're franchisee number one or franchisor, like it still takes a lot of work and emotional grind and effort. And so, any success in business, whether it franchise or not, is definitely food for the soul, I guess you could say.
Yeah,
Um,
no question. I
so
mean, I was cutting lawns in high school, and my dad's best year was, I think, 32,000, a year. And
Mhm.
Anthony will tell you he was cleaning toilets with his mom in high school, so neither of us came from money. And so it's been a really neat opportunity for us in franchising for sure.
And, to that point, I am seeing a lot in the franchise space that people are more comfortable talking about exits. And that's kind of the first thing that you mentioned. In the franchise development space, more than not, you're selling the dream. You're selling you're going to pass it down to your kids. You're going to have it forever. It's a marriage. But I think what we don't talk about is the successful exit, because that's more common than, passing it down to your kids. And I think the other thing is like, what if your kids don't want it? Like we tell our kids, we're like, all right, whoever's number one kid when we dies gets their pick of the brand first. So like be a good kid, be top of the hierarchy. But at what point, like how do you coach to that now? Because you're still very heavily in the development aspect of it, where
Mhm.
do you find that that's heavy in the sales process as you're awarding licenses, as you're bringing on brands? Or is that still kind of secondary in terms of what people want to talk about, what they're thinking about when they're purchasing brands and licenses?
Yeah, it's a great question. But believe it or not, I talk about it quite a bit with our investors in the process.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's partly because we are in retail. I always say, you get into franchising, there's kind of really two paths. It's either owner operator or semi-absentee. All I know is semi-absentee, kind of retail, and that's all I've done in 30 years. So I'm biased, okay? But I
Sure.
do believe in that model, because when you go to sell it, I just think it's worth a lot more. You're going to get a multiple on EBITDA because you're essentially selling cash flow, and you're not so tied to the business. Where if you're selling an owner operator model, not to throw shade on it, but when you remove yourself from the picture and you are the business, that impacts the business significantly. So you're looking at much lower multiples. So we do talk about it a lot in our business, and candidates, I would say it's surprising how many of them think about that from the get-go. I mean, they're almost thinking about the exit, strategy from day one before they even sign. What does that look like? So they really can see the full return on investment, that the potential, at least, because, I always try to coach people. It's not just the reoccurring revenue and income that you're building, even with scaling the business. It's also the end game. When you go to sell it for a nice multiple on EBITDA, there's a great, value there, because you're building equity in this business. And so that's one of the best things about, getting into this. So I think in systems, it happens, it really depends on the investor, but I would say on average, a lot of, investors will look at that 7 to 10 year mark as kind of a, benchmark of when we can look at kind of, you build it, realize that income for 7 to 10 years, and then look to, exit it. There's also some thinking behind longevity of the brand. And, when it hits its peak, it's kind of like a stock, you're buying it, young, and you're trying to sell it kind of at the peak, if you will. So there's, but I'd say, like with our systems, like as an example, Pilates is our most mature system. Don't have a lot of resales in it because those owners are they're crushing it and doing really, really
That was
well.
my next question. What does that turnover look like?
But we are seeing, I'm seeing some larger Zs that have, like 50 to 100 of these things that are basically strategically, they came in buying 3 to 6, but strategically buying out, kind of weaker operators essentially, and then turning those studios up because they've got such great operational experience, and they're now spreading themselves across multiple DMAs, and really you're growing exponentially, no pun intended. But so seeing a lot more of that, which is exciting for us, because these are great operators, and we only see usually, improvements in the AUV when we exit a, weaker operator. But yeah, so we're starting to see a little bit more of that, in our most mature systems. But it's a good thing that we don't have a lot of resales at this point, because, if you're calling around in the system and 7 out of 10 owners say, "Hey, I'll sell you mine," and that's usually not a great sign unless they're selling it for, pretty nice multiple on EBITDA. So, but that is part of our strategy, with investors, to kind of look at that, because that is part of the return of these things. And we're not naive to it. We kind of look at it as fresh blood coming into the system. We have to prove the new operator. And so it's not a bad thing by any means. And I kind of have found it to be just part of franchising, so as these systems mature, our resales become more prominent.
No, and I like your point of, we're not looking at it as a bad thing. I think sometimes franchisors kind of keep it behind closed doors of so-and-so selling, or there's a resale, it's its own little not talked about department. And I really think, that needs to change. I think that most of it people assume is, oh, they're not happy or they're not doing well, but there's so many different aspects to that. And to your point, selling it while it's hot is super valuable. You don't necessarily want to run a car into the ground and then get rid of it for a new one. So I think that there's a lot of strategy there that I'm glad people like you were talking about. Now, with your licenses, are your franchisees or franchise partners allowed to buy multiple brands, or do they have to stay within one system?
Yeah, I think it's about 12% of our system today that owns multiple units in multiple systems or brands with us. And we're seeing more and more of that, especially, there's examples where, we're sold out in a market, and the franchisee is doing really well. They want to continue to expand. So in our system, especially, if they're doing really well, it's not a huge learning curve going from one of our modalities to the next. As I mentioned, our operating platform is essentially the same CRM system, same blocking and tackling, if you will. They trust the franchisor, and they can leverage a lot of things with that scaling, because they can leverage labor pool, they can leverage membership, they can leverage. There's even some scale of economy with doing that. So we're seeing more and more of that, to where even in small markets, let's say like a Bozeman, Montana, where it's kind of a one studio town, if you will, and someone it's not their dream to own and operate a single studio. They want to have at least 3. Then they can do kind of we call it like a 3-pack with us across three modalities. So
cool.
and then again, kind of utilize some of those synergies between the brands. So it works out really nice.
So, and I know this is a little bit different because you guys are retail, and the wellness industry is just notorious for doing this well. But was there any, or I should say, what was your path to success to marketing the multiple brands, whether it's a franchisee that owns 3 different concepts, or, just your brand leaders trying to, leverage the platform? Because I've seen a lot of platform companies hang their hat on the fact that they're going to be able to use their current customer base, their current franchisees, and then fall at like 1% and don't see any adoption. So how did you guys structure so that the adoption for both clients and franchisees that wanted to purchase more brands was successful? Because I've seen that fail so many times.
I think there's quite a bit there to unpack, actually. I'll give you an example.
Like, how do you run the world?
No, it's not like that, but thank you. But I'll give you an example. We're in escrow on brand 11 right now. And we have our annual convention coming up in December. And so our existing, franchise partners across all verticals are going to get first crack at that. So we have a window of opportunity where we say, hey, we want to invite you to potentially invest in this brand before we open it up to kind of the outside world, we say. So that's, kind of, we always take care of our own partners first, is one example of that, in terms of, the scaling. In terms of like when we have a new investor coming into the system and they're looking at, hey, should I start with one, or should I start with, or should I consider an area development strategy? Again, I always coach people on doing, what is best for them. But candidly, most people coming into a system like this, again, it's not their dream to own or operate a single studio. They're looking at growing a more significant business here, and that really would require scaling over time. So I coach people, really from a defensive strategy. You want to control everything you can control in business. And if you're getting into retail, you want to control the real estate, and so especially when you're getting into, say, a brand earlier on, one of the better opportunities with that is securing some of those better territories that won't be there, say, a year or 2 from now when you want to consider expanding. So you can always, do the opposite and sell the territory. It's an asset, and it's supply and demand. As territory sells out, that territory becomes more in demand. It's, so there's no downside risk, in my opinion, really. You're not going to lose the license if something changed in your life and you couldn't develop. I mean, 99% of my partners open all of their, whatever they secure up front. My average owner in Xponential owns, 3 or more of these things. As again, it's not like it's not an owner operator model where it's like their dream to own a studio, right? So they're looking at this really more as a business, but there's some passion involved there as well. So if you're coming in earlier to system, there's just incremental advantages of being able to secure, I call it an area, or be an area developer. Having been an area developer in multiple systems myself, I'm a big advocate of it. I mean, you're going to control, first of all the real estate in that area. And if you're looking at like a 3-unit area, it's not just 3 targets. You're controlling probably 4 or 5 trade areas, within that area. So you have incrementally more real estate that you have the ability to secure. If it ends up where maybe that 3-unit area supports a 4th unit, you're going to control that because you've been in control of that area for all of that time. And it's a no-brainer business decision for us to award a 4th license in that area. You're going to control the labor pool in that area. You're not going to have, the labor applying at your location and some other franchisee's location that's adjacent to yours. You're going to kind of own that. And then you're going to blanket that area from a marketing standpoint. And I would say, if you have members that are on the fringes of any of your locations, you win 100% of the time. If you have, a team member that's sick, you have more logistical coverage there. There's some scale of economy with marketing and labor. I can go on and on, but it's just, for me, it's the way to do it, and so Most people kind of lean that way. Our average franchisee, comes on with like I'd say 85% of my new partners will start with what we call a 3-pack. And I always kind of coach people, look, your commitment is one. You're going to sign one franchise agreement when you come on board. But you have the ability and the control over all outcomes, meaning when you want to open your second, you own the development rights to do that. You've already paid the fees for it. If you wanted to sell a license, you could. If you want to swap your 3rd license out for my 11th brand that I'm buying this month, you can do that. So there's a lot of flexibility for our partners when they get into the system. So,
and that's really cool to hear, because I think of when people assume, you go platform, you've got P&E, you've gone public, that all of a sudden they lose a lot of that flexibility, or you've lost a lot of that kind of entrepreneurship. I don't want to say flexibility, but just ability to kind of mold the system. And so that's really interesting that you guys still allow that. Yeah. Is there any, and I know most, if not all of your concepts are pretty vastly different in their services, but I imagine there's some crossover, and that's just in general, there's crossover for, the client looking to increase their fitness or wellness. Right. So do you guys find any rub there in terms of franchisees maybe competing for the same market, or your franchisee that's like, I've got 4 brands and we're all competing for the same customer? I talked to Mary Thompson over at Neighborly, and she actively coaches on, this is not a scarcity mindset. Like, we need to get out of the scarcity mindset and more into the abundance. So do you guys see that on your end? And do you agree with Mary on that?
Oh, 100%. I coach people on this, and we have the data to support it. When we cluster our brands, you'll see a lot of shopping centers now that have 3 or 4 of our brands sitting in there, So we have the data now to support that shows that our AUVs lift, not decline when we cluster. But I try to coach people. It's like an auto mall. If you're an auto dealer, do you want to be on an end of town where there's no other dealers within 10 miles of your dealership, or do you want to be smack dab in the middle of the auto mall where you have every make and model competitor within a half-mile radius? And the answer. You want to be in the auto mall because everybody's going there to buy a car, and your potential buyer has different interests, different brands that they maybe see themselves fitting into, different price points that they're looking at. So it benefits you, to be in that kind of synergy. Even us setting up next to an Orange Theory or other brands that are even outside our portfolio makes a lot of sense for us as well. I wish landlords saw it that way as well, but they don't always, but it really does. It's like, that's why you have food courts. That's why CVS sets up next to Walgreens. That's why Walmart sets up to Target, going on. Burger King put themselves on the map following McDonald's. So it is the way to do it. There's no question. We have not seen, at any point or any degree of cannibalization with our brands. Now, that said, we're kind of getting, as I said, a little bit tapped out on fitness verticals, and that's why we're going in the more kind of health and wellness direction, like with this next one. It'll be complementary to everything that we're doing, but it won't be technically fitness,
Got it. Yeah, because we have in our franchisor, they brought on, they had a mosquito and tick franchise, and then they brought on a pest control franchise that heavily markets mosquito and tick, and we were like, we want to be in the whole community thing, but this feels a little too close for comfort. So, I was just wondering about that. And then in terms of the boutique side, who are your competitors? Are they, if any, is it the big box gyms? Is it other boutique fitness? Where do you guys fall in terms of that competitive landscape?
It's really the independent today, believe it or not. That's by a landslide our biggest competitor. Wow. And again, not to throw shade on them, but it's hard for them to hold up against a nationally franchised
these are the people that have started their own studio for whatever.
Yeah, Club Pilates. I've got 1,000 units operating today on that brand. Name my number one nationally franchised competitor. You can't, right? Doesn't exist. Cycle Bar, my number one competitor would be Soul Cycle, but again, we have more indoor cycling studios open than all other nationally brands combined. So we're the dominant player there. But if you really look at other significant players, Soul Cycle is about it, really. I'm not no disrespect to others that are out there, but again, there's nothing substantial from our perspective. So it's largely, again, the mom and pops in the market that we're competing against. There's so many markets where like a Soul Cycle doesn't exist. And I can go on and on. It's the same thing really for all our brands. So that's why it kills me when people go, oh, this space is so crowded. I just see these things on every corner. And I go, I couldn't disagree more with that, because it's really early in terms of nationally franchised brands, true brands in these verticals today. And that's why private equity is so hot on it, and why, the space is on fire. If you look at most spaces like retail massage, and I love the space, I developed brands in that space, but there's like a dozen nationally franchised players there. You're kind of too late, if you want to come in now. Or hair care, again, no disrespect to the space, but there's 15,000 units out there operating between Supercuts, Fantastic Samps, and Great Clips, and good luck finding a space that doesn't have an exclusive on it already. So you're paralyzed when it comes to retail. So we don't come up against those challenges, in the marketplace with where we're at in the space. We're really lucky with that at this point. But yeah, that's, it's kind of it's unique. So big box, not really, believe it or not. I mean, we're killing the big box. The boutique space that's where a lot of the growth is in fitness. It's very transactional in the big box, and they can't, the reason why people want boutique is community, number one. That's really what they're after. Fun is number two, and then results is number three. And you're just, when you go into the box gym, again, no disrespect there, but it's very transactional. You're going to come in the door, someone's looking down at their Instagram. You're not getting, you're not getting that community effect. You're kind of on your own. There's no accountability there. It's just a different animal. And that's why, boutique is going to continue growing. And that's why, the big box are struggling, to be candid. So we don't see them as a threat. And as far as other nationally franchised models, we're really the largest in every space that we're in today. So we're kind of Coca-Cola at this point.
So were you guys, when Peloton dropped, now I know that you guys you can fight that, community, that whole thing. They tried to do it, but without having to have people leave their houses. So when that dropped and became super popular, there's literally a Peloton like over there. Do I use it? No. Do I go somewhere? Yes. So there's your point. But did that create waves with you guys at all? And Cycle Bar in terms of like, oh shoot, people aren't going to come to us anymore? Or was it just a kind of another, here's another fad?
That's funny. We get asked that a bit. And again, I always respond saying, Peloton is the best thing that ever happened to Cycle Bar. And really? I'm not exaggerating that. The Peloton member is our number one lead that we convert in a Cycle Bar today. Number one. So the iPad, and they've done a very good job with that whole experience, but it just cannot ever match up to the in-person experience that you get into going into that theater in a Cycle Bar. But sometimes for a novice that hasn't, engaged in indoor cycling before, it can be a little intimidating going into that environment. So the Peloton is a great place for them to start, and it's kind of a gateway for them to come into to feel more comfortable coming into the in-person experience in a Cycle Bar. So it's literally been the best thing that's ever happened to us. We actually go after that Peloton lead and market to them because, again, they're a natural candidate to come into the studio experience. Yeah. And they love it. So we hope Peloton gets into more of our verticals, candidly. And we knew, and then, again, not to say I had a crystal ball, but when I kind of heard the rhetoric in the media during COVID that, in-person is dead and at home and digital is where it's at, I want to throw up because, it's not like Jane Fonda didn't have a digital workout 30 years ago. So it's been around forever. It's like the at-home kitchen, replacing the restaurant. It never will. People want that experience, and that's part of people are spending their dollars on experiential businesses, and that's what we are. We're kind of that fun entertainment value in addition to getting a great workout, and so that's why So Peloton. It wasn't any surprise. Obviously, that's all people could do, during COVID because we weren't let out of our homes. But, we knew that so they had a heyday during that period, but we knew once that ended that, people would come back in flocks and groves, and that's what's happened. So.
Yeah. And now, it's interesting. You think about it. Like I have friends that will go to whatever, the one Peloton studio they have, it's in New York, I think, and be like, oh, I did a ride. But for the actual person who's like, I want this in person. You guys kind of are that local Peloton studio, obviously Cycle Bar, but it's a really interesting way to look at it and not something I would have anticipated, but definitely makes a lot of sense. Mm-hmm. Switching gears a little bit, and I know you mentioned you've got a 11th brand in incubation here. What do you guys look for when you are, because I'm sure you're constantly vetting and looking at, brands to bring on. For you, what are some big things that you look for? Because I anticipate it's not just the concept, right? It's you're right, and all of that. So if for brands who are listening, whether they're new to P&E, they are P&E, or they're just a brand out there, what makes a good brand to acquire?
There's a lot there, and it gets harder too as we get bigger, which sounds weird, but because it really has to fit our portfolio, and so number one, we really look for opportunities that would be great expansion opportunities for our existing partners, obviously. Mm-hmm. So again, complementary to what we're doing, makes sense that it might enhance the business they have already, or that it would be a great add-on for them. So that's definitely a factor for us that we would consider. Of course, we want to be in something that's going to be sustainable. That's really important to us. So we're looking at macro trends, and we don't want to get into anything that's going to be considered a fad, or that may not be a 20-year brand. So again, sustainability, market factors we're looking at. So there's some hot spaces out there that I'm like, wow, let's go on this. And they're like, well, we're not sure about that one, how sustainable that is, or still there's not a little risky because there's not enough testing on it. So we won't, I'd say we're a little conservative on going into, some like a really, kind of hot new space, that until we see that, hey, we believe this will be, this is going to be a long brand, So those are the things we look at. Of course, we look at unit economics. We look at the retail play. We look, at the margins. We're looking at, how scalable is this? That's another thing for us. All of our brands today really are about 1,000 units domestically, and that's just in the U.S. And so obviously we have a global opportunity as well. That's becoming a big part of our business, 20 to 25%, in fact, today, and growing. But, we're looking at, is this a concept that we can only develop, 300 units with? Because there's some concepts that are only going to play in certain markets, or regionally, or maybe they need a certain demographic. So that's another component. One of our mottos at Xponential is we want to bring our concepts, really be able to make them open and welcome to everyone, is kind of one of our philosophies. And so we don't want to have it, we want to have it, we don't have it exclusive. We want to have it inclusive, so that we can invite, as many people into the brand as we can. So there's a lot of factors that go into that. I look personally a lot at the labor pool. What does that labor pool look like? Because you might have a phenomenal concept, or again, kind of a new vertical, but is the labor pool there? Are we going to have to, train that labor pool? Is it require special licensing or those kind of things? So we're definitely looking hard at that. What does that labor pool look like? What does the customer segment look like? Will this fit into our XPass? So, I can go on, but there's a lot of things that kind of we got an R&D department that kind of digs into this stuff. And I think the other thing is, do we believe in it? Are we excited about it? Like Anthony will say, like, I'm not going to buy anything that the development team isn't like over the moon excited about, because you guys have to be excited about it if we're going to grow this thing. So, that's a factor too, so we kind of drink the Kool-Aid.
I like it. And, it's interesting because I think there's a lot of brands out there that don't want to face the fact that their concept they're selling has limitations to growth. I think everyone says, I'm going to be thousands across the world. And realistically, like to your point, it's going to just not do well in regions, and there's other demographics. So, understanding that is a big piece of it. Yep. And, on a higher level, and this is going to be a hard question, but I think very valuable, but when you're making decisions, whether it's you for your position in whatever you control, or on the exponential level, what are your tips for decision making? Because you're not just now making decisions for your team or you as an owner, but you're also have to bring into consideration all of your brands and all of their franchisees and their employees and their clients, and now your board members and the public. So what are your kind of thought tracks, your advice on making decisions in a franchisor role such as yours? Because I think a lot of people get into this like analysis paralysis. They're always afraid to piss someone off. And when you're in a position that, you're in, or in a position of power at a franchise, it's inevitable. You're going to piss someone off, or you're going to, so how do you make the conscious decision to make the right decision most of the time?
Wow, that one stumps me a little bit. we're fortunate where we have resources to do a ton of, market research, so that we
Mhm.
use the data. I think we use a lot of our experience as well, which is, we have just so much experience on our leadership team. It's just endless. I mean, we probably don't have an executive that has less than, 15, 20 years in franchising. So we really rely a lot on our experience, as well as the data, as also really considering a lot of what we talked about, but also, um, yeah, we definitely, think pretty hard on, hey, is this going to cause an uproar in the system? Are they going to be, upset at us, or are they going to be really excited about buying into this? I mean, so that definitely factors in quite a bit for us. Originally, I mean, even one of the things that we looked at was, Orange Theory did such a great job with their, their brand, and they sold out, but they didn't really give their partners, growth opportunities to continue growing. And
Mhm.
they did really well. They were sold out, and those partners wanted to expand into other stuff, but they didn't really have an opportunity with that Zor. So that's one of our bigger priorities, is to make sure that, hey, whatever we buy into, that our systems can be pretty damn excited about this, and conversely, it's
Mhm.
not going to piss them off. But also, all the other things, like I mentioned, that we believe in it, as a great concept.
So when I'm talking to mostly, private equity firms, I am often coaching them on the fact that while there is the data and there's the numbers, there's a lot of what Scott Abbott at 5 Star calls the squishy stuff, which is the culture, that's the relationships, that's the
Definitely.
kind of complex landscape of the franchisees. So in terms of being data driven or culture driven, do you think when you guys are making those decisions, whether it be a new brand or just anything, operational marketing, do you try to go 50-50? Is it, unique in the certain circumstance, or is it, kind of a gut most of the time, like our experience and we know our system and our people. So we're really going to drive with, I guess, the culture on this decision.
Oh, 100% culture driven. Yeah, we really are. I mean, we don't want to do things just, hey, we think this is going to work on gut. We definitely do the market research, but no doubt, we are a culture driven company. It's, I'm sure all companies feel like got a great culture. Ours is a bit unique. There's a lot of passion in our culture. I think it's because maybe it's health and wellness. And so many of our executives and team members, we all, are really personally connected to it and into it as well.
Yeah.
So that, we're fortunate where, obviously, with our position, we get some phenomenal resumes,
Sure.
for executives that want to really, be a part of this and work on our team. And so I've seen some insanely good resumes, and we'll, interview, and we'll go, oh man, great resume, but I just don't see them fitting the culture. So
Right.
pass, and we really do that with everything from hires to awards. Even with franchisees, we get some people that, again, great, tons of money, and, great executive background, but we go, man, our labor pool, I wouldn't want to work for this guy or gal. Our labor pool is going to hate them. So pass, or, so those types of things really play big. Also, we just kind of look at, is this going to be a PIA, because we don't need that. I call that quality of life at this point, and so those are things that really factor in, even though, like, it might be a great opportunity for someone, it doesn't fit our culture. It's a hard no for us. It really is. I could definitely convicted about that for sure.
Well, no, and I appreciate that. And I think that that's so important for people to hear, especially coming from how successful you and Xponential are, because, numbers guys are numbers guys, and they want to see the return. And I can appreciate that. But what I always coach in franchising is you're not going to see the return if you're ignoring the stuff that maybe doesn't have a number sign attached to it. It's that data that you can't quantify. So, it's good to hear that even at your size, you have to be culture driven.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on time, but I have to ask the question that everyone wants to know. Why go public? What pushed you to say yes to that? And, are there any regrets there, or are you excited about it? Because it's very rare that we see a franchise brand go, like, to your point, from zero to public, as well as you guys did. So now you've got a lot of people that can claim to be your boss. So what was that decision, and how's it going?
That is the question, isn't it? That's a tough one.
Mhm.
I guess I would say, whenever you go public, the strategy is you basically look to go down both paths, right? You're looking to position
Mhm.
to either to PE or go public, and so um, can't get into all the reasons why strategically we thought public was the way to go at the time, but we did. And so I'd say overall, it's been an awesome experience. It's been a great learning experience, which I know it sounds kind of weird as part of the strategy, but that was something that was intriguing for us is like, hey, this is going to be a new experience. We'd already had PE behind us, and something else to conquer, and we felt we could do it well. And we've had 10 straight quarters where we've exceeded, all of our goals, for our investors. So that stuff is great. And I'd say it's been awesome. I get to sit, go stand on the podium and ring the bell. I mean, that stuff, honestly, that's bucket list stuff for me. It was really, really cool.
Yeah.
It definitely, and I'll say pros, we're getting incrementally more, I would say, brand exposure for Xponential as being a public company than we would have gotten if we'd stayed private. So those are, definitely a lot of the perks. There's, strategically, I believe, you can, when you go public, you can project more of your growth as well. So the multiple can be better. So there's some
Mhm.
opportunity there as well. So that's all the good stuff. Now,
Yeah.
the hard part is, we kind of felt like, hey, we would be evaluated based on our performance, not on what the market thinks. And so, like even at this point, we're kind of lumped in with other Zors that are in our space that are very different. So if they're
Mhm.
not performing, they kind of go, oh, well, is Expo next? And so that part I don't like because we get lumped into these certain kind of sectors. Like even with retail, if there's a softening in retail, we're kind of technically lumped into that where it's like we're not really retail, and our
Right.
business is thriving. So that's the part that's a little frustrating, only just because we're knocking it out of the park, and you get people that don't know anything about our space that go, oh, this is going to get hurt in a recession, when this is one of four spaces that actually grew out of the recession,
Yeah.
of the Great Recession of '08. So that's the frustrating part is that
Mhm.
you get some folks out there, and candidly, when your stock's up 150%, there's a big fat bullseye target on your back too. And so, we don't mind that, and we don't shy away from that. But those are some of the things that people should be aware of that are a part of going public. So you have to have tough skin, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, and that's great advice. And it's I could see kind of, hitting your head against a brick wall where we are doing so well. We're telling our team we're doing, the franchisees feel it, everyone feels it. But at the end of the day, the public perception, whether it's one dumb guy troll behind his, laptop going, oh,
So
Exponential is going to fail because retail is failing. And, it doesn't take much to bring down morale.
yeah,
So I definitely understand what you're saying there, but also applaud the culture and the nature of just being persistent, and maybe it's, it relays itself to that kind of competitive athletic wellness realm.
yeah.
But yeah, you've got to have grit, and you've got to have the stomach for it, because you're very much in the kitchen when you go public.
That's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and you
So,
hit the nail on the head. The way we kind of fight back for those
mhm.
trollers, as you said, is we keep putting up stellar earnings calls, and we just keep having a big grin on our side of it, going, here's to the naysayers because we just crushed it again. So that's the way you battle it. And so, but we're still a fairly young,
Mhm.
publicly traded company, so it's kind of
Sure.
early in our growth. But I think as we continue to kind of put up these strong quarters, more and more investors will see the writing on the wall that we're not a fly by night.
And I love that. It's like so typical. Like most people, I fell into franchising. Now I'm here. It's like we went public because we were just going to try it out. We wanted to learn. I was like, that is the most franchise thing I've ever heard. Well, Lance, I have to end on this. What's next for you guys?
Continued focus on growing the AAVs, continued focus on opening, more stores and
Mhm.
buying more brands, and continuing to dominate in this, health and wellness space. I'm really excited about kind of the direction that the company is going in terms of, as I said, more health and wellness and complementary. There's a lot of hot verticals there that we're going to have a lot of fun with. I think that will really benefit our existing partners and just continue to grow our business. So funds we are acquiring another brand here, obviously, before the end of the year, and likely another one in the next 6 months. So we'll kind of have brands 11 and 12 coming down the pike, and just going to keep growing and having fun.
I love that. And I have to stop talking to you because I keep telling my husband, no more kids, no more brands. But if you keep telling me the cool things Expo's doing, we're going to have more brands. Well, Lance, thank you so much for joining us. If you guys want to connect or learn more about Xponential brands, you can check them out online. And of course, if you are a candidate that's interested in getting into the Expo, you guys can shoot us an email and we'll get you connected with Lance and his team. Lance, thanks a lot.
Hey, this was fun. Always great seeing you.
Thanks for listening to The Art of Franchise Marketing. This show is brought to you by NetCertive. We help franchise brands and multi-location businesses run localized digital marketing at scale. To learn more, visit netcertive.com.